Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me once again, Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cam?
Hey, what's going on?
What is going on is you and I had some fun playing some D&D last night.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
We don't need to dive too deep into that because I know one of those tropes is like telling people about your D&D game is just not interesting. But it was fun. We had a session 0. It was my first time really ever playing apart from like one session I remember back in like 4th or 5th grade or something like that. But obviously I got into D20 and Critical Role a lot in the last couple of years. You are a rehabilitating DM.
I just relapsed.
Yes, relapse.
Yeah.
You are a returning DM.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've talked Dungeons and Dragons with Jazz and Frank on the show in the past as well. Maybe someday we'll all get together and play some stuff. But yeah, so far that's been a little fun. But today we're gonna be talking all about the actual like hotness of the day, Star Wars Jedi Survivor, which Cameron has been playing. Well, I have been rushing through the Final Fantasy Pixel Remasters on PlayStation, so that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit. But before we get into any of that, if you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, ring notification bells, all that fun stuff. So Cam, kick it off. I guess folding into this, obviously you're still... like the Let's Plays of your Jedi Fallen Order playthrough are still coming out and will still be coming out for the next couple months every Wednesday. But you have beaten that game and you jumped into Jedi Survivor. So feel free, I guess, before Jedi Survivor thoughts, if you want to share your kind of end thoughts on Jedi Fallen Order.
My overall thoughts on Jedi Fallen Order is I'd probably give it like a solid, a solid like 3.5 to 4 out of 5. It's sitting in that range there, but I think it's like that as far as a game goes, like a first go at it, like Respawn does not have a history of doing these action type games. They are noted as being like originally from Activision, spinning off working for EA doing Titanfall. Apex is kind of like the big thing that they're known for today, and then Fallen Order was just kind of like out of nowhere. And I'm not gonna lie, like for a first shot at it, solid. Like just a solid game. I think gameplay wise, it's really good. I heard at the time of launch was like plagued with bug issues. I only ever had like a serious issue bug wise, I think twice. Although one time was the final boss fight. So that being that aside, I will say, as somebody who came to it much later, prepping with the series before Jedi Survivor comes out, or has come out now, my feelings about it were like it's good, like it's a solid, good, has great moments, but I felt that a lot of the moments that were really cool weren't necessarily like I could see how like in a longer terms like told story that like it could have been earned. But I don't always feel, or I felt like, okay, there's like some stuff. You pointed out that because I was streamlining the game, I was beelining it.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't going around looking for collectibles or doing these like side collectathon things that they had in Fallen Order. That I didn't have a chance to like really spend a lot of time with the side characters that a lot of other people do. So when I say what I said, please understand I had a very mainline, streamlined playthrough of it. So I did not talk to Grease on this planet after I was there for like the 4th time. Like I did not have those interactions and that experience of playing that game. That being said, I still think it was really good. I think it has one of the best like endings. Because I felt like it was it's a story about trauma and grief. If you haven't watched Barrett Courtney's video on Fallen Order, and I think that he makes tons of salient points that I agree with. There's some that I don't necessarily agree with because I just don't think that I fell in love with Cal Kestis as a character. But overall, I was really enraptured by the gameplay and the kind of style of. Like I'll be honest, like I think that it ranks up there with what I consider up until yesterday what I ranked number one as far as like lightsaber gameplay combat, as far as like making you feel like a badass Jedi.
Hmm.
Force Unleashed 2, while having kind of like a dumb story and premise, gameplay wise was fantastic. This is the closest we've ever gotten to that level of gameplay as far as like using lightsabers. But that was years ago with LucasArts games. And so this is a brand new take on it. It's more of a Souls-based kind of style of slower combat, which I think works super well. And overall, like, yeah, I really liked Fallen Order. I think Fallen Order was a solid first attempt, and I was excited after finishing it to hop into Jedi Survivor to kind of see like what that evolution looks like. We got the core concept and we got the ideas displayed before us. Now, what can they do to iterate on top of them?
Hmm.
And so I guess that rolls us right into my thoughts on Jedi Survivor.
Yeah. I mean, before going into your thoughts, just give a quick, like, how much time have you put into the game? Not necessarily like how far are you, but yeah, like how much time. I guess that's really the only metric
Yeah.
to go off of so far.
I have gotten to and finished my first round of doing things on the third planet. I'll put it that way.
Okay. About how many hours do you think that is over the last couple days?
I mean, to be fair, I'm not streamlining it because I'm not let's playing it.
Yeah, you're actually just like enjoying this one at your own pace.
Oh yeah, no, and like and also I will say that there's a lot more to do
Hmm.
in this game on each planet. Because it's they heard people like me thinking, hey, a collectathon's not that interesting. They've come back around to it. There's actual like it's called rumors, but they're essentially the side quests. And they are numerous, not overwhelmingly numerous, but numerous. And so I will probably say I've probably maybe put, oh gosh, definitely more than 5, maybe more than 5, probably less than 10 hours. I'm in that range of things, but I have been having I've been spending a lot of time
Hmm.
in that game.
Yeah, you because I was working the first couple days, it was out. I basically, like, you have my copy in your system. You recorded the Let's Play for it that we did that went up on Saturday, first hour-ish of the game. And then I remember like you kept playing the game, and like you kind of like peeked over at one point and was like, oh, I've probably played enough. If you want to like hop in, you like, and I was like, no, I'm good. And then like the next day, you just, you spent a good chunk of Saturday again while I was at work with Jedi Fallen Order or Jedi Survivor.
Yeah.
Just
Just so
yeah. The other big thing for kind of diving into just the general thoughts, I know a lot of the conversation around the game has been its polish and the bugs and issues and stuff like that.
yeah.
Have you encountered a ton, like, just to knock this out of the
Sure.
way first?
I will say, yeah, I've seen the bugs. I've seen bugs on my end of things. Nothing game breaking, but like I wouldn't be surprised with how the biggest issue I felt like with the first game was that especially combat wise, it felt there was just something a little off. I think they addressed that in this game and it's done very, very well. But I will say traversal and traversal sometimes just doesn't work. The leaping and bounding and kind of those the explorative features of movement don't work all the time. And by that I mean there were some points where it was just like I don't know what's going on. Like it's just bugged.
Mm-hmm.
And so it happened there. I've only ever had it's technically crashed on me twice, but only one was like a hard crash where I had to submit an error report. The other one was I was stuck in a loop of being of like falling off a cliff over and over, and so my respawn on top of the cliff after falling off was not actually like a spot you could stand on.
I feel like I remember that being I remember that from the first game too. That happened to some people.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. Because they implemented like a fall distance auto reset basically in the form of like an auto death, and you miss a chunk of your health.
Yeah.
I had a like not forced restart where I was like, if I don't restart it, it's just going to keep doing this until I get a game over.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd rather just like be done with it.
On that.
And the other time was during a cutscene. Like the jump from a gameplay to cutscene hit just a hard crash on that. Went back, redid it again. zero issues.
Yeah.
So
On the like the fall damage that you take, I remember that like in the first game, like unlike if you die, like it's significantly longer. But if you fall, it's like pretty quickly you're back in the game. And it did take like the first few like to realize, oh, my health has been like dipping away when that happens. Oops. Um, I did see accessibility wise, they added like features in this one where like you can basically like turn that fall damage off if you want.
Oh yeah, you can. I keep it on because I want to just have that.
Yeah. I imagine you're playing it probably more or less like how it was delivered, but did you look at any of the accessibility stuff?
I did. I have actually done a few of like the accessibility features I've accessed and done with are non-gameplay specific ones.
Mm-hmm.
But I loved that right from the get-go. They had just like a brief introduction to some very minor accessibility features, and then when it came time, if you wanted to, you could really like customize your experience playing this game. They did an amazing job with that. I think accessibility in this game is like off the charts as far as it goes. It's not to the depth of level of, I mean, The Last of Us Part 2 for me will always be like nobody's taken that crown off Naughty Dog for the accessibility features in that game. This is probably the one that's come closest. It's still like I would not like say that it's nipping at the heels of Naughty Dog's accessibility features, but it's like, especially coming from the first one to this one, it is a significant difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, now we've knocked out some of those kind of
let me put one thing here. The only thing that I'll also put a ding on, and I appreciate it because there is the performance versus visual mode.
Yeah.
It is a stark contrast to the way that it takes away from like because it's, don't get me wrong, this is a beautiful game.
Mm-hmm.
It's very beautiful.
But it is noticeable when you switch to performance mode instead of.
So if I'm on performance mode, if it's having a good time and an okay time producing that higher resolution, it looks great, it plays great, it's wonderful. Then there are moments where like I know it's chugging.
Mm-hmm.
I can see the engine chugging at this point because there's a lot of particle effects. There's a lot of like people on screen. There's a lot of like item. Like it's a busy scene that I'm on. And when you're in an because there are spaces that are big open spaces, big open world spaces, contained on some of these planets. And so it is a lot.
Yeah.
That being said, I think for what they're trying to do with it and what they're pushing with this engine, they're definitely pushing this engine to its limits. And I respect that. And I understand that there is going to be that noticeable, like, wow, this resolution they really had to, like, the engine auto stripped a lot of textures off to get to this point where it could still run.
Mm-hmm.
But I would prefer that than what I had in Fallen Order, my last boss fight. I was like, man, dude, is there a force power where she's force slowing me? Because
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I remember you recorded that Let's Play and just like completely scrapped it because you were like, this game has just like gotten like super cheap or whatever, and then you realized it was like, oh no, the frame rates were just dipping like crazy, and you basically reloaded the game and then it went fine.
Yeah, I had to skip the cut. I didn't have to skip the cutscene. The first time I think the cutscene happened, something happened with it. Because I've also heard from other people that Fallen Order to this day still has like a synchronization, like it can get off sync during cutscenes. And there's that, and then there's also just, it was like dipping my frame rate super hard, or it was just chugging at moments, and it was just like, because I would put in my inputs to react to something, I'd get hit by it, and then Cal would pop up, and then do all my inputs that I just put in. And I'm like, what is going on? And then we had somebody ring the doorbell. And I'm like, you know what? That's a perfect sign that this needs to be scrapped.
Yeah.
Because then I restarted everything, and then after that, it was like bing, bang, boom, no problem.
Yeah.
With the boss fight. Still had to do it a couple of times because it is a tougher boss fight. But it's meant to be because you're also in like a very like confined area, and the final boss of Fallen Order is like just can be really mean and bullying.
Yeah.
If you're too defensive and you're not aggressive enough, you get bullied in that fight.
So in Survivor,
yes.
how's the combat been so far?
The combat's amazing. Right from the after probably the first hour, you unlock the duels. Like there was a move that you could unlock in or that you had unlocked through the story in Fallen Order, where Cal would do like a surprise like double lightsaber move. In this one, there's a full double lightsaber style, and it is very much the duelist style. So if I have like I'm fighting a boss and I'm one-on-one, and I need to tick off their like guard meter significantly, I go to this form, and that's what I use. Single lightsaber is much more about that kind of like overall jack of all trades balanced out form. And double lightsaber this time around is not just, oh, I am surrounded by enemies, I need to have it. It is actually primarily focused, like it's the highest defensive capabilities that I've seen so far in any of the forms. And then there's a new form that I'm not going to talk about it because I think it might be spoilers, but it is the one I'm using primarily right now, and I freaking love it. It's so dang cool. Mm-hmm. But the moment it happens, it's just like a, yes. This is like, yes, this is, and so that, I mean, if that doesn't tell you, this is by far is the best combat it has been in any Star Wars game. Mm-hmm. It is the coolest combat has been in a Star Wars game. This is it. It has everything. The thing that is limiting is you can only use 2 stances. That's the different lightsaber modes at a time. And so I ended up dropping dual-sided lightsaber to use double lightsaber. And then now I've dropped single lightsaber for this new one. Mm-hmm. And so I have like it's so sick. I'm loving it so much.
Sounds like it's unfortunate that they can't do the like Ghost of Tsushima, like you just mm-hmm. have access to all 4 of those stances.
Or I would also like compare that to
shift through them.
Dante and Devil May Cry 5. I would also say that.
Sure. I don't have that as a reference.
That's fair. I would say that it would probably fit more in that style of things, but the stances and what I'm referring to are all but the same idea. Yeah. Like you have access to everything. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's just a technical capability, like it was limited with that, or if that was a distinction that they wanted to make in the gameplay to limit you in order to make you make those hard choices, but also maybe make a variety of interesting combat choices when you do a new game plus.
There you go.
I could easily see people doing speed runs, single lightsaber mode, only. Mm-hmm. Like I could definitely see that happening in this game.
Yeah, but the Soulsborne Elden Ring, like I'm gonna beat this game playing it on an actual lightsaber that I've rigged up to do what I do or whatever. Yeah.
Or I'm gonna hook it up to a dance pad and I'm gonna DDR dance pad my way to beating this game. Yeah, I could see that happen with this game.
Yeah. We'll see weirdos do that kind of stuff. Well, I'm glad combat's working really well for you. And I imagine, like a lot of things, I think like a step up improvement. Is there anything that has that you haven't kind of had that vibe with, like, oh, this? I feel like this is, at least at this point, a step back.
The only thing I will say, it's a narrative thing. It is a very small spoiler, so I won't spoil it. But it is introduced right at the beginning of the game, and it's like a real series of tell not shown.
There are I watched a GameSpot video that was basically like the story of Jedi Fallen Order so far kind of thing, and apparently there was like a comic that kind of like fills in some gaps.
Is there? Okay.
That that introduces a couple elements, and if it's what I think you're referring to, it was specifically called out as like, this explains how Cal got the blah 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 and how so-and-so got the blah blah blah. That answers that question, because there's a big departure and a new set of characters that are introduced, and it's just like, I don't know who any of these people are. Mm-hmm. And like narratively, I'm like, oh, okay, so this is, I know where things are going in the story now. Yeah. It's very obvious. It's weird. Like, does the game itself have a... Well, you said like you boot the game up and it kind of like fills in the story. I'm guessing that is really just the story of the first game and
accurate,
not this extra little side thing that apparently happened somewhere.
100%. And there is straight up a scene where it's Cal and it's supposed to be emotionally poignant and it means nothing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Cal is a lot more fun in this one. I will say Cal as a character is way better. Like, where he ends at the end of Fallen Order, I was like, okay, I'm really starting to kind of like this character. Mm-hmm. Where he is at now in Jedi Survivor, I'm very much getting a good, like, I'm like, okay, cool. I'm liking Cal. Cal is fun. But not just like, he's fun to play because he's making, like, jibs and jabs and whatnot. It is very much a this character is at a place where they are and the writing is focusing on the parts of him that are interesting. The fact that he has been around and had to do a lot of jobs, and like he was a scrapper, and like a lot of that kind of like attitude of the working class and the working man aspects, considering Cal was born into like a monk based aristocracy, almost like brought into that order, a monastic order type thing that was held, at a high level of respect and placement in the galaxy's order, to then being a scrapper on Braca. And kind of like that he carries in this game especially, he carries that feel of an everyman that the first game was not like. I felt like the first game narratively didn't know if it wanted him to be this this kind of like in exile, monastic noble character, like a lot of Jedis are kind of characterized, and or if they wanted him to be the scrapper kid from Braca who just happens to have a complicated past. They have solidified by saying Cal is a Jedi Knight, but he has had a very rough and complicated background to get him to this point. And complicated not in that it is like complex or has like a lot of like twists and turns, but it is like there are stark drop-offs in his life where his life has gone through significant change.
Yeah. That
builds a level of complexity. And so there are moments when Cal is not like, Cal talks like a scrapper. He talks like a regular person. And it's amazing to see him being a Jedi Knight who is also that, rather than being a scrapper who thinks he needs to be pretending to be a Jedi Knight. I think would be a good way of kind of like reflecting back on what his character was in the last game with the information I have now. That's kind of what I'm seeing. That might not be the intention, but that's kind of like what I'm receiving. Also, they are continuing strong working class notes about like anti-bourgeoisie, anti-imperial, anti-fascist, and I am 1000% in on it. I freaking love a lot of the stuff going on as far as like with characters and the stories that it's telling. And like, I'm really, really, really digging like the story that it's building and the questions that it's asking its characters. Because the question where at the end of the last game was like, well, what now? And we see what they've each member of the Mantis crew has chosen to be their what now and the path they've gone down, and seeing that reflected, and also seeing like kind of like the issues that were pre-developed prior to this are now having to be resolved in order to find like solutions to a conflict. I will say sometimes it feels like this is the third game in a trilogy rather than a direct sequel.
Yeah.
I do feel like, and it's probably because there's this entire narrative missing out of the middle of it.
I don't know. Like, I don't know how extensive that side story thing is.
And it's possible it's not very extensive and it's kind of explained away, but I'm not gonna lie, there's probably like there would have been or could have been a solid sequel in between these two. That being said, I'm really happy with what we've got. I am 100% a believer that this game could be Game of the Year, depending on how it goes. It is by far the best Star Wars game that is not Knights of the Old Republic.
All right, fair enough.
That is like, if people are asking, it's like, why would I make that distinction? Knights of the Old Republic to me is like a borderline perfect video game. The only thing that I think about, and that's the reason why you're like, why do these nerds keep clamoring for a remake or like a reinterpretation or a remaster of it?
Because it doesn't play that well anymore.
It doesn't. It doesn't play that well anymore. It's super dated graphically, super dated. Gosh, it's so bad.
Even performance-wise, it's like, oh, this was early, like, acting in video games kind of stuff. It's
100%.
like, a lot of those characters continued on into like, Mass Effect and stuff like that. But yeah, I remember going back when my Series X came in, and like one of the first things I booted up was my original Xbox disc of Knights of the Old Republic, and I played through a good little chunk of the game, and I was like, oh yeah, this is from a time, this is a 20-year-old game.
Narratively though, I still think it still holds up.
Oh yeah.
It has, and that's probably the thing, is that KOTOR has one of the best video game stories of all time.
Indeed.
Even outside of Star Wars, it's still one of the best.
And like great characters.
Oh yeah, the characters are amazing. The characters are I think, peak BioWare before we knew what BioWare characters were like.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that future characters are literally based off of the archetypes established in KOTOR.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Yeah,
that being said, I think Jedi Survivor is up there as far as like being a fantastic game.
nice.
We'll see how the rest of the game plays out, but so far, like the scores it's getting are completely justified. I like technical issues aside, I kind of don't care because I'm having so much fun.
Yeah.
Even the minor characters you meet throughout the game that are now like giving you quote unquote the rumor stuff are interesting, and like you're seeing a lot more of the galaxy in this game. Even though I've only been to 3 planets, I feel like I'm seeing more of it than I saw in the last game.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you have so much more room to explore. When I first left the second planet, it gave me a percentage of how much I've done on that planet, and I was surprised that I was under 40% because I did everything I could before we left.
Well, I wonder if it'll be like the other, like some of the planets in the last game of like, oh, you'll come back to that planet and explore a whole new area or something like that.
Yes, you have to.
Yeah.
The narrative is like, it's not like, hey, where should we go to look at this temple? It's like, no, there's like narrative pushes getting you to different places, and you have to figure some stuff out.
Yeah.
Also, some surprise characters are in this game, and I will say there is one character that when they show up, I was blown away. I could not believe that. Oh, okay, cool. This is really cool.
Nice. I was gonna ask about that, but then it was like even asking like, hey, the last game had some fun little cameos. Does this game have some fun little cameos? Is a spoiler. So
I will say this is not a cameo. This is a fully a fully character is in this game.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I look forward to jumping into it. I imagine I'll at this point I'll probably just let you like go through and play the game, and then I'll come get my disc back.
And then your I was gonna say your copy of Tears of the Kingdom.
And then Tears of the Kingdom will come out, and I'll be like, well, I'll let everybody else play Tears of the Kingdom. Then I'll play Jedi Survivor, and then by the time I jump into Tears of the Kingdom, I can go and look up how to do all the cool shit that everybody else has already figured out.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Have like, oh, how do I do this? Cool. Somebody already figured it out. Great.
Yeah.
Can do that.
You could be playing Tears of the Kingdom. Like maybe I'll do like the obligatory. Well, I've been playing. I just replayed Breath of the Wild, so I'll do like the first chunk of the Let's Play kind of thing.
I think it's super fun that we're gonna do like single Let's Plays of like long-term series that we've played through.
Yeah.
Although you timed yours way better than I timed mine.
Indeed, yeah. And even like with mine, I finished it and I was like, all right, if I stick to the like every Thursday, I'm gonna be a couple weeks late. But if I just throw in like one weekend's worth of a Saturday and a Sunday, boom, I'm good.
There you go.
So that's what I'll be doing right before, basically and it admittedly it will not have like all of the DLC, which I still need to go back and do.
Yeah. Oh, and I also will say, like Fallen Order, like I was not anticipating taking that long to finish the game.
Mm-hmm.
With how people described how long it takes to beat that game,
yeah.
I thought I would clear it a lot faster. But also I found myself really enjoying like discovering things and like finding new paths on stuff. I did get like sidetracked quite a bit.
Yeah. Without diving into any potential spoilery things, have you encountered any like real like Dark Souls-y boss fights that have kind of rung your bell a little bit, or where does this compare to Fallen Order on that front? Because even going back to like Fallen Order, I don't remember like a ton of like real significant boss fights.
I will say there's been one that well, maybe no, two. I will say two. One is an optional boss fight that I found, like I followed a rumor and had to do that boss fight.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is a story boss fight that is like actually really freaking sick.
Mm-hmm.
But the only reason I had to like go back into it and try it again is because there's like logistical things that happen in that fight that you wouldn't think are going to happen in that fight, but it turns out it's happening in that fight and it's cool. But like I was not anticipating certain things being done by this boss because you think, oh, it makes sense why, but when you're seeing it, it is that kind of like disconnect of what?
Okay.
So I'm excited for people like to hear what people thought about that boss fight because I thought it was super cool.
Nice. Yeah, and I imagine nothing's gonna come near as tough as the fire giant that you spent the last couple weeks trying to beat in Elden Ring.
I don't want to talk about that, Trevor. I don't want to talk about that.
Well, any final thoughts on Jedi Survivor before we move over?
Oh yeah, it's really cool. Well, like I'll definitely give like further updates as I finish it. So
Cool, cool. Yeah. So while you've been doing that, I've been burning through the first three Final Fantasy, first three Final Fantasies in the Pixel Remasters on PlayStation. I picked up the Pixel Remaster collection like back when it first came to Steam. Dabbled a little bit with some of them back then, and like at that point, I even kind of mapped out like if I wanted to do like, all right, I'm gonna get super into Twitch and I'm just gonna like do a playthrough of like all of the mainline Final Fantasies. Can I do them all on a system and all that kind of stuff? So I have like I think pretty much all of them in my Steam library at this point. But I didn't end up putting too much time into the Pixel Remasters originally on Steam. I jumped back in a little bit when I got my Steam Deck and had some fun there. But it was kind of like a well, it's got to be inevitable that they're going to come to Switch, and like if they're going to come to Switch, they really got it. Like they've got the achievements in here. They really got to bring them to PlayStation too, right? Where you've got all of the other Final Fantasy games. So when they finally eventually did, I was like, okay, I'll hold off until there. Annoyingly, couldn't get like the physical PlayStation copy that I would have liked, or especially the collector's edition, because Square Enix just doesn't like money, I guess, and so they sold out immediately, and now they're going for like $700 on scalpers on eBay and stuff. Sorry, third-party resellers, which is frustrating and annoying. And at that point, I'm like, all right, well, whatever. I do theoretically have a Switch copy coming from Play Asia at some point. I believe it's just probably going to take another week or two, but I've been playing through the digital versions on PlayStation. I just finished the platinum on the Final Fantasy 3 today, and it's always interesting because Final Fantasy 1, 2, and 3 are probably the ones I've played the least. Them and 5, I would say, largely because I mean 2, 3, and 5 just weren't really accessible here until much later, much after the fact, and. So I think like the only times I really played through a couple of those were like back when Final Fantasy 12 came out. I think I was like, I'm gonna do a full playthrough of all the Final Fantasies and do like a definitive ranking for myself, and
mm-hmm.
and that's kind of what I'm doing again here now is like playing through the first Final Fantasy. It's a incredibly short game. I've like platinumed that in a day. I'm one of the great things that the Pixel Remasters in this iteration have added is like boosts, so you can like if you don't want to spend all that time grinding, you can like go into the settings and say like I want to get experience points and gil at like 4 times speed kind of thing. So that like cuts down on a lot of that stuff. But like to get the platinums on these, they're basically like 100% the game. Find every monster in the bestiary, find every item in the world, like open every treasure chest, go to every location kind of thing. First game, super easy, nothing missable. But like as soon as you get in game 2, the world map changes at certain points and stuff gets locked out forever, or there are places you only go once and stuff like that. So fortunately, a lot of great Steam users out there, to their credit, created some great 100% completion guides that I just kind of been like following through. And it's fascinating to see, especially in something like Final Fantasy 2 or Final Fantasy 3, like the building blocks of systems and ideas that would get much more vastly improved in like Final Fantasy 4 or 5, 6 kind of thing over time. But like seeing the like, oh, it's cool that they had that idea here, doesn't work as well as it does in Final Fantasy 6 or something like that. But it's been a fun kind of like.
Can I pick your brain a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. What was your party setup in Final Fantasy 1?
Final Fantasy 1, I did a warrior, monk, black mage, white mage.
Okay.
And that's predominantly the kind of like mold I've stuck with. If I had them, much like I did in like a let's play in a couple let's plays a while back, it was like I was the warrior, you were the monk. Um, Frank was the white mage and Logan was the black mage, I think, is what I did.
What you don't know, Trevor, is that I did several years of American Kenpo.
Sure. Um, so yeah, that was the makeup in one. And in two, like two is it's less of a job system kind of stuff, and you can just like give any character any spell
Yeah,
and have them like so like my issues with like 2 and 3 and why they like end up being lower in the ranking than the first game is that they're there's no characters there really, and that's like also the issue in the first game too, but the first game at least was like, oh, this is new.
yeah.
So it's not.
The first, I will say, the first game is distinctly like, I'll put it out there. It's distinctly Western RPG.
Mhm.
In its style, the way that it's like spells are used off of like per uses per day.
Yeah,
It's
it's
distinct. It's distinctly Western RPG because it's prior to the what would later be considered the classic Japanese role playing game system of HP and MP
yeah.
type thing.
Yeah, the MP comes in Final Fantasy 2, but then they go back to the like a certain number of spell slots per spell level in Final Fantasy 3, and then I think they do away with that for the rest of them.
Yeah, no,
But like
it's one
Final
of the
Fantasy
original ones.
4, which is the one I'm like playing now, and was my very first Final Fantasy game back when it was Final Fantasy 2 on the Super Nintendo. Um, like that's where like characters are defined, and it's like if you're Cecil, you're playing a Dark Knight until you play a Paladin, and that's it. Like
Hmm.
you can't switch him up and do other stuff. And it it's I think I prefer that kind of like the railroading, I guess, of that a little bit more than
Sure.
just like oh, you can do everything. Like in Final Fantasy 3, that was the first one that had like a robust job system. Like I was playing as like I had again kind of I think for that one I had like what was it? I had warrior, red mage, white mage, black mage to start, and then like once new classes opened up, um, I pretty you were the red mage, and I basically like kept changing you to like suit whatever needs I needed for a thing. Like Frank stayed the white mage, Logan stayed the black mage. I was the warrior. You became like a ranger for a little while because you had like this, great barrage attack that just could hit all enemies. If I needed like to go through locked doors or something, I'd switch you up to a thief for a little bit. Um, I will say 3 was interesting in I'd forgotten this. Like there are parts of the game where it's like, all right, you have to be a frog to get into this section of the game. Like you have to cast frog on all of your characters and then go into a thing, and then you can like go back to being a person, so that you don't immediately die in the next fight. And then the same kind of thing with like, all right, you have to go through this entire section with mini cast on you. So any of your like warriors are going to be useless. Go ahead and switch them into mages. Um,
Hmm.
it's cool that you can like do that at the drop of a hat. Sucks that like if you were a warrior and you just switch to a mage, you have no magic. You have to like go heal yourself, and like Final Fantasy 3 is interesting in that like it's the one that doesn't have like tents and cottages, so you can
Yep.
just heal yourself in the open world. Doesn't even have ether,
Nope.
so you can't like restore magic at will. You just have to like go find an inn somewhere or like a spring to restore yourself. Um,
Yeah. So a question I had. So I've never played Classic 3. I've only ever played the DS remaster, where
uh-huh.
they
They
address
they
some of those
3D'd it, and
things.
yeah.
There's a There's a narrative. There's a like their characters are like definitive. Like there's an actual like structure to. They did a lot on that DS like remake for
Hmm.
3. That is like very impressive, and I'm actually a really big fan of it. I love 3 in that remake of it. Funny enough, it's like it was the Final Fantasy remake before Final Fantasy 7 remake in its own way.
Hmm.
But I loved it, and I love the kind of like
We
story
also,
that they
yeah,
told through it.
there was also the Final Fantasy 4 DS like 3D remake.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, no, I'm a little sad that there's no option to do like the DS one is locked on the DS. I don't think that you can.
It's you can buy it on Steam, or at
Can you?
least you could. I have it on Steam. I have it in my Steam library. I don't know if they've gone and like delisted it now that the Pixel Remasters out there, but yeah, I have that. The
But is
3DS
it the
remake
actual
version.
like DS3?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure it's. I'm pulling up my library right now. Final Fantasy 3. Yeah. Yeah. Final Fantasy 3 3D remake.
Yes. Oh, that's so cool. Okay, cool. Cool, cool, cool.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, the 3D remake is so good. And like it's not like it's like more interesting, but it does for me a lot of it does for me a lot of good things to kind of address that.
Mm-hmm.
Um
I mean, it's definitely like hey, this one's never been to the West. Let's like
yeah,
actually put some polish into it for the people who've been clamoring. It was the Live Alive before Live Alive kind of
it's
thing.
true.
It was a like, all right, we're gonna put our best foot forward with this. It had a lot of great ideas. Final Fantasy is a big name in video games now, so it'll probably sell pretty well. Yeah, let's put some resources behind this. Let's try some new ideas, new designs. But like we've got the basic framework of the game.
Mhm.
That's not going to change too drastically.
There's a reason I popped the fuck off when we were watching. We were at the Final Fantasy concert,
Uh-huh.
and Final Fantasy 3's song came up, and I was just like, "Let's go!"
Yeah.
Like
That's
yeah.
another especially interesting element on these, like the first few games. Like they like when we were at the concert, it was like, all right, like it opens with a medley from like the first three games, because the music of the first three games is pretty minimal. It is pretty limited. Like it gave us, of course, some iconic themes and stuff, but it is pretty like, all right, there aren't like it's not a, oh, these each location in this game has an identity, has a
Exactly,
theme,
yeah.
has a tone to it. So yeah, but it is interesting because the as another part of the remaster is you can switch between like the original kind of chiptune stuff or modern orchestrations, and I'm just kind of keeping them all with modern orchestrations, which is how they're all
Yeah,
and they sound amazing.
yeah, it's a limited number of tracks that they were able to produce for these games back in the day, but the soundtracks on them are all bangers. Like
Yeah.
there's no bad song, and that's why the melody or the medley that we got at the concert was so great, because it's like we are paying. It's not just we're paying honor to it or homage to it. It's like, hey, we know this is limited, so we're gonna let you guys know right up front. We're only picking like a few tracks from each of the games, because otherwise they share them.
Mm-hmm.
Like half the music is shared between 1 and 3. Like half their each of those soundtracks libraries, half of those are from the other games.
Yeah.
Because that, why would you not? Because some of those are like the classic Final Fantasy battle theme. Some of them are like, a lot of these are like shared between it that are shared later on down the road, but are not as like as diverse in their soundtrack.
Yeah.
Because they were built for the NES.
Yeah. It's also interesting, like one of my issues in a lot of like Final Fantasy games, especially like the ones I guess that I don't really like resonate with as much, like Final Fantasy VIII, for example, is like, oh, like I hate that the boss of that game just comes out of nowhere, really, or is in like just the end of the game, and like the your antagonists throughout most of the game are completely different people. Final Fantasy 3 is like the pinnacle of that. It's
Yes,
like,
100%.
all right, you've played through this entire game. Now here's a cloud of darkness that is just, that's your final boss. Okay. Like Final Fantasy 2, interestingly enough, is like, oh yeah, like this whole game is set at war, and you're at war with this foreign nation. The Emperor is your big bad. He's your big bad through the entire game. You're just like rebels trying to push through.
Yeah, it's a classic story of just like revolution.
Yeah. It's interesting, again, like going back to the like, oh, here are hints of those things. Like Final Fantasy 2 has a lot of characters that like join you briefly and then like, sacrifice themselves for the greater good or something like that. And it's like, oh, like my touchstone of that is like Tella in Final Fantasy 4
Yep.
or Yang or Sid, like all these characters that like join you for a brief little bit, but then, realize you guys are the ones that need to, move the plot forward. And so they, go out in heroic blazes of glory or something like that. But yeah, it's so again, it's just like really cool. I tweeted out when I got the Final Fantasy 3 Platinum today, like now things are going to get really good, because again, this is the like the era. I mean, like for the longest time, my Final Fantasy rankings were like 6, then 4, and then like 9. And so
I'm curious how you're going to feel about, when was the last time you played 5?
I mean, probably. I mean, like it was the PS1 version of 5,
Nice.
and so yeah, it was probably like around the time of that like Final Fantasy 12 coming out or something like that when I did that like original playthrough. It was because that was another one like it didn't come out initially here. It was only part of that like Final Fantasy Anthology
Mhm.
PS1 thing. Um, so yeah, it'll be interesting to like, especially going from the like very strict character kind of creation of Final Fantasy IV, going back to a job system and kind of more
Mhm.
fluid characters in that one. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, but like going back to Final Fantasy III, like eventually once I got like the last couple rounds, like I turned myself from a warrior into a knight, and then once I got Dark Knight, I was basically a Dark Knight for most of the rest of the game.
Right
Um,
on.
and pretty much, yeah, no, the rest of the game. Um, Eventually, I turned you into a ninja, which is one of the last two classes you get, and then the other last class you get is a sage, which is basically like all of the magic users in one. So white mage, black mage, and summoner. And so I just turned both Logan and Frank into that, but like because you still only in that one only have 3 spells per like spell level. It was basically like okay. Um, Frank was still the predominant white mage, but also had like Bahamut in the final, and then Logan was still the black mage, but also had like I gave like Logan basically like 2 black mage spells and the summoner spell for like each level.
Mhm.
Um, and that was kind of how the magic breakdown for them worked. Um,
And I was just a cool ninja.
and you were just a badass ninja throwing shurikens and wrecking shop because you're doing like since I had a crap ton of gil because I had it set to 4 times, I could buy shurikens in that same like final area for like 35,000 gil a piece or something like that. So I had like 30 shurikens going into like the final boss fights. And I just had you throwing them every time doing 9,000 plus damage to the final bosses. So you were definitely the combat
I mean,
MVP
let's
of
be
the
fair. The
game.
way you described it, it's like I was literally like the saving grace of most of that game.
I mean, yeah, yeah.
Coming in clutch, just like
The
I always do.
Yeah, what once I moved you away from Ranger as the Dark Knight, one of the abilities the Dark Knight has is like blade swipe or something like that. And it's
Yeah.
basically like it's a attacks everybody kind of attack and
Hmm.
does like massive damage. So it was like I was taking out the crowds. You were great for like the big heavy, especially in those final fights. Like it's one enemy, but it's every fight's a boss fight basically. And then I mean like in those first 3 games, I love that like even white mages and black mages like attacking does a good deal of damage.
Yeah.
Not as much as like an actual warrior, but like they do enough damage to. It's not like oh they're hitting with a rod and doing like 7 HP damage.
Yeah.
Like they're doing hundreds of damage on those fights. But yeah, it's I just got Tella in the Final Fantasy IV Pixel Remaster, so I'm still very early on in that one. But again, like going through, again, very appreciative. Like the worst case I had was in Final Fantasy II. There is like a point where once you do this thing, pretty much all the enemies in the overworld become like harder versions of those. So if you didn't fill out the bestiary, you're gonna just not be able to find those enemies anymore. And so I had to. Fortunately, I had like a save that I could go back and like
Nice.
reload to right before I had done it. I had kind of passed that threshold and was able to
Is
go
this in
get
4?
somebody that I'd missed. That was 2.
2. Gotcha. Okay.
Final Fantasy 2. And that was when I started getting like way more. Okay, I'm going in. I'm in a new area. Let me make sure I clear out everybody that's in the bestiary for this area before I move on. Even like because some of it is like, oh, this guy is just really really rare and only shows up in this level. I'm like, cool. I'm just gonna grind on this level for until I find that guy. Final Fantasy 4 is gonna have a couple of those that are gonna suck. The most notable one seems to be you have to get all of the like all of the like hidden summons, but like not the like oh go find Odin or something. It's the hey there are summons that just are random drops like goblin or you get a cockatrice summon. You get like you get summons of just like the random enemies. like Mind Flayer, I think is one, in Final Fantasy IV, and they're just random drops from you just have to fight a certain enemy type over and over again. Blown away because the very first fight of the game, I got the Goblin one. So I'm like, all right, well, that's one of 4 that I don't have to spend hours upon hours trying to grind out. But we'll see how the rest of those go. But yeah, it's being able to play these again in a way that isn't going to just be sucking up needless amounts of time because grinding was the way to artificially lengthen those games at the time. Doing it in a manner that is like, okay, this is respecting my time. This like I can play through the entirety of Final Fantasy 3 in about a day. I can play through the entirety of Final Fantasy 1 in a day. And get everything has been very fun. It is like a nice little refresher, and the music again is great. The visuals all look great. They're like it's minor touch ups, but everything pops. Has a ton of fun on screen. All the enemy sprites and stuff have been given a nice coat of paint. So yeah, it's been delightful. I wasn't planning on being like, all right, I'm gonna go through and get all the platinums on these, and then I got the first one. I was like, all right, let me look and see how tough the second one's gonna be. Especially because it was like I was like, all right, you got to get every treasure, you got to get every bestiary thing, and pretty much all 6 of them. I was like, oh, it's gonna be a pain. And then I found some guides, and I was like, all right, well that makes it less of a pain. So I can just kind of do that while I've got other music playing or something like that, and just kind of zone out. I don't have to go and talk. Final Fantasy 2 would have been a real pain in the ass of all right, you have to learn all the keywords and then you have to talk to the right person with the right keyword to go figure out where you need to go next. Thank God for a guide, because I was like, I don't have the patience to have to remember all that stuff. So it's just you learn this keyword from this person, then ask them about it, and then, okay, you're good. Now go talk to this person and use this keyword and stuff. I was like, thank you, Steam users and PlayStation PSN profile trophy guide creators so far that I've been very much exploiting and using. So yeah, Final Fantasy Pixel Remasters, ton of fun, having a great time with them. If you are a fan of the classic games, definitely enjoy. And if you're not, they're definitely worth checking out because they're the most probably accessible way to play these games now. Any final questions or thoughts there, Cam?
No, I'm excited to hear more from you.
Yeah. And like I said, yeah, now that I'm into 4 and then especially 6. Oh yeah, 6 also, I knew because I was working the day these came out or whatever, I was like, I'm never going to be able to be the first to try and platinum. But Final Fantasy 6 is such a special game to me. So I basically was there ready to buy the thing when it went on sale, booted up, just raced through to get the first trophy in Final Fantasy 6. And as last I saw, I'm still in the probably top, first 10 achievers of that trophy. So I'm like, hey, there's I put my little mark on Final Fantasy 6 for the annals of time. Yay. So yeah, shout out to that. I look forward to getting back to that one as I continue this journey. So yeah, and that will also give you plenty of time to finish Jedi Survivor.
Yep.
Me sitting there and finishing some Pixel Remasters and stuff. Yeah. Also, yeah, just music, so great. Always so great. Cool. Well, that is gonna do it for this episode. Yeah, it was a pretty nice quick one there, Cam. As I said, we didn't actually run super long on this. You follow Cameron at RevCabot, 2 B's and 2 T's. Anything you want to give a shout out to, Cam?
Yeah, check out what I mentioned earlier. Go check out our Let's Play my Let's Play of Jedi Fallen Order. See what I mean when I talk about it. Because I mentioned some stuff here. If you're like, well, I don't know what you mean about that, Cameron, go watch my playthrough of it then.
There you go. Yeah, Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor, both available on youtube.com/thatnerdysite. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. In addition to those, you can catch our Elden Ring Let's Plays, which reminds me, Cam and I need to sit down and record some more. We got those going out on Tuesdays. You got my replay of Breath of the Wild going out on Thursdays, except for, in a week or so where there'll be a couple bonus episodes there on Saturday and Sunday in the lead up to Tears of the Kingdom. My Tears of the Kingdom Switch arrived the other day, so that's very sexy and pretty. And yeah, you can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site. Go to thatnerdysite.com for all latest from us. One other thing I will shout out, Cam and I did The Princess Bride as our most recent That D Plus show. Just one of those all-time great movies. Cam's very favorite movie of all time. So definitely go give that a listen if you want to hear a couple people nerd out about how good The Princess Bride is. And then we'll be back this week with Star Wars Visions, since we're going to have May the 4th day here on Thursday, I believe. So, yeah. If you liked what you heard, once again, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, ring notification bells, do all of the things you can do on these things that are happy algorithm tweaks. Thank you for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.